I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
The 45th President of the United States takes the oath and makes a vow.
For too long, a small group in our nation's capital has reaped the rewards of government while the people have borne the cost. That all changes starting right here and right now.
Protests against the new president turn violent, and the 44th president says a final goodbye.
Yes, we did. Yes, we can.
A transfer of power and a celebration of American democracy.
This is the CBS Evening News with Scott Pelley reporting tonight from Washington.
This is our Western edition. For the 44th time, the American presidency has passed from one man to another peacefully. But just blocks away today, there were also violent protests. Donald Trump took office at noon Eastern Time on this 20th of January, as the Constitution requires, on the west front of the Capitol, as tradition dictates. Like all things Trump, his inaugural address was uncompromising, populist, isolationist, a philosophy from the early days of the Republic which found its 21st century voice. Mr. Trump said, on this day, power returns to the American people. The day was filled with tradition. It began with Mr. Trump and his wife, Melania, attending a prayer service at St. John's Episcopal Church.
How are you?
Then, a short drive to the White House for tea and coffee with the outgoing president. Mrs. Trump came with a gift for Michelle Obama. The 44th and 45th presidents rode together from the White House to the Capitol. And in a show of unity, 3 other presidents, 2 Democrats and 1 Republican, were there to witness this passage of power. And so was the woman Mr. Trump defeated, Hillary Clinton.
You raise your right hand.
Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas administered the oath to the new vice president.
I, Michael Richard Pence.
And the Chief Justice of the United States, John Roberts, swore in Mr. Trump.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
The sound of 21 guns saluted the new commander-in-chief. His inaugural address set the tone for his presidency.
Americans want great schools for their children, safe neighborhoods for their families, and good jobs for themselves. But for too many of our citizens, a different reality exists. This American carnage stops right here and stops right now.
Mr. Trump escorted his predecessor to a Marine helicopter, and we can only imagine what Mr. Obama was thinking as he surveyed Washington for the first time as a former president. Within minutes, the new president got to work, making his cabinet nominations official, and the veteran deal maker got his first taste of Washington horse trading.
I'll give you a lane. Do you want a lane? Okay, don't worry. Tom is not insulted.
No, Mr. President, the leader wants it.
We raise our glasses to you.
The Trumps and the Pences were guests of honor at a luncheon at the Capitol. Mr. Trump and Hillary Clinton shook hands for the first time since the election. President Trump led the inaugural parade along Pennsylvania Avenue. Mr. Trump watched from the reviewing stand in front of his new home as bands and marchers from all over America paraded by. It was a dark, drizzly day in Washington. President Trump's speech forecast a brighter future, but condemned the nation's capital. Here's our chief White House correspondent, Major Garrett.
Today, we are not merely transferring power from one administration to another, or from one party to another, but we are transferring power from Washington, D.C., and giving it back to you, the people.
President Donald J. Trump used his inaugural address to speak to those who propelled him to the presidency. Giving voice to the frustrated and fed up, the president criticized political figures in both parties.
For too long, a small group in our nation's capital has reaped the rewards of government Washington flourished, but the people did not share in its wealth. The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer.
He revived protectionist rhetoric from the campaign trail.
It's going to be only America first. America first. Every decision on trade, on taxes, on immigration, on foreign affairs will be made to benefit American workers and American families.
The president's address did not attempt to heal the wounds of the contentious election, but he did make an appeal for tolerance.
Through our loyalty to our country, we will rediscover our loyalty to each other. When you open your heart to patriotism, there is no room for prejudice.
At a congressional luncheon, the president sounded a more conciliatory note, paying tribute to his defeated Democratic rival.
I was very honored when I heard that President Bill Clinton and Secretary Hillary Clinton was coming today, and I think it's appropriate to say, and I'd like you to stand up.
In his first act in the Oval Office, the president signed one executive order instructing federal agencies to ease the financial burdens of the Affordable Care Act, while the administration pursues its repeal.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me.
And Vice President Pence swore in James Mattis as Defense Secretary and John Kelly as Secretary of Homeland Security, the only Senate-confirmed Trump cabinet nominees.
First, the President Trump, and First Lady Melania are attending 3 inaugural balls tonight. Scott, over the weekend, the First Family and White House staff will move into the residence, the Oval Office, and the West Wing, all in preparation for the first full day under the new Trump administration on Monday.
Major Garrett in front of the Trump White House tonight. Major, thank you. John Dickerson is our CBS News political director and the anchor of Face the Nation. John, inauguration speeches are always about binding the wounds of the election and bringing the country together, and that's not what happened today.
No, this was straight out of Donald Trump's campaign, where he loved the roar of the crowd in front of him, and he gave his speech today to the crowd in front of him, those people who felt like their politicians had betrayed them. There were signs that he was going to talk about unity, but usually with a unity speech, you offer something to the people who are nervous about you as a president, who didn't vote for you. He offered unity, but only on his terms. And then he destabilized things further by attacking Republicans and Democrats, the politicians, by saying they're the ones who sold out those people in the audience.
Well, as you say, he excoriated Republicans and Democrats alike. Can he accomplish his promises, get them through Congress?
He's trying a new route, which is basically to say, I have a movement, and I'm going to use the power of that movement to force you to do what I want. That's the theory. The other theory, though, that I'm hearing from the Hill is they think this is a negotiating posture. This is the opening bid. He has got his group on his side, and he'll work out the details with lawmakers, and we'll have to just see how that all shakes out.
John Dickerson, thank you very much. John will have a primetime special tonight with Gayle King on the inauguration. That is coming up at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. More than 60 Democratic members of Congress boycotted the inauguration today. So will the new chief executive get along with Capitol Hill? Nancy Cordes takes a look.
At the stroke of noon, Democrats found themselves out in the cold. A minority party in the House and Senate now shunted out of the White House, too.
I was hoping that he would say more to bring the country together.
Other Democrats described the speech as a dark portrait of America, crime-ridden and weak.
To people who say this speech was dark, isolationist, what do you say?
Well, yes, it was isolationist, clearly.
Nebraska Republican Jeff Fortenberry said the party may not agree with its new leader on everything, but there's enough common ground to keep them busy.
I think there is a great deal to be accomplished that can be accomplished quickly, and I think the people are demanding it.
Starting with the creation of a cabinet.
The ayes are 98.
Late this afternoon, the Senate confirmed Mr. Trump's nominees for Secretary of Defense and Secretary of Homeland Security. But Republicans slammed Democrats for holding up votes on the others.
Earlier today, the director and deputy director of the CIA resigned. They left. They're gone.
Fights are coming soon over a border wall, corporate tax cuts, a Supreme Court vacancy, and the repeal of Obamacare. Congressional Democrats made a silent statement at the swearing-in today, wearing buttons that read, "Protect Our Care." They also began the task of rallying dejected supporters.
But our response has got to be not to throw up our hands in despair, not to give up.
Democrats don't want to get stuck with the party of no label they pinned on Republicans for years. So they made it clear today, Scott, that they want to work on some of Mr. Trump's top issues, like infrastructure spending and trade.
Nancy Cordes on Capitol Hill. Nancy, thank you. Several blocks off the parade route, anti-Trump protesters turned destructive and violent. More than 200 people were arrested and at least 6 police officers were injured. Chip Reed has more on this.
Protesters dressed in black, some wearing masks, moved through downtown streets, setting fires, smashing storefront windows, some fighting with police. Officers dressed in riot gear responded with pepper spray and stun grenades. Closer to the Capitol building, members of the Black Lives Matter movement chained themselves together, blocking an entrance to the National Mall. Several Trump supporters scuffled with the group. Members of the LGBTQ community sang and danced as they blocked another security entrance. Ceci Blanchard traveled from Poughkeepsie, New York to protest.
They also should be challenged. They shouldn't just be allowed a free pass into this. They have to be making an active decision. This just can't be like a fun event for them. They have to see the people they're hurting.
Nearly 24 groups received permits to protest in Washington today, but around the country in San Francisco, Houston, and Boston, groups also gathered to show their opposition to President Trump.
Hell no, no Trump!
Sam Ager came to D.C. with a group of hotel workers.
I think it's going to be 4 years of constant battling. I'm not a fan of this new administration at all. Donald Trump has shown time and time again that he doesn't care about working people in this country.
At one point during the parade, President Trump, the First Lady, and their son Barron got out of the car and walked. But Scott, as they approached a large group of protesters, a Secret Service agent tapped the president on the back. That was the signal to return to the safety of their armored limousine.
Chip Reed along the parade route for us. Chip, thank you. Coming up next on this expanded edition of the CBS Evening News, Inauguration Day in a Midwestern state that made history. As Donald Trump begins his presidency, some of his former advisors are being investigated for possible links to Russian officials. Jeff Pegues is looking into this.
Sources tell CBS News U.S. investigators are looking at the business ties between some Trump campaign associates and Russia. They are also tracking the finances of some of the hackers linked to the Russian cyber attacks on U.S. political organizations. CBS News has learned that investigators have obtained information from human sources and are delving into electronic communications between individuals connected to Mr. Trump and Russian officials. One name that continues to surface is that of Mr. Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort. In a statement today, Manafort said the pro-Russian narrative about me being pro-Russia and interacting with the Russian government is a Democrat Party dirty trick and completely false. Hope Hicks, a spokeswoman for President Trump, said, "We have absolutely no knowledge of any investigation or even a basis for such an investigation." 2 weeks ago, then President-elect Trump was informed by FBI Director James Comey of a 35-page dossier that contained unsubstantiated information about his ties to Russia. The document was compiled by a former British intelligence agent. Sources say U.S. intelligence continues to probe the veracity of the claims.
It's all fake news. It's phony stuff. It didn't happen.
After the dossier was published online, Trump denied the allegations and accused the intelligence community of leaking the material to hurt him.
And that's something that Nazi Germany would have done and did do.
Outgoing CIA Director John Brennan denied that anyone in the intelligence community leaked that material. But Scott, in an effort to mend fences, tomorrow President Trump is scheduled to visit CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia.
Jeff Pegues in the Washington newsroom. Thanks. For those of you just joining us, this is a special expanded edition as we cover this historic day, the inauguration of Donald Trump as the 45th president. Have a look at this. This is the 44th president. In the last few minutes in the Oval Office this morning, Barack Obama left a personal and private message in the top desk drawer for Mr. Trump. It is a tradition begun by President Reagan. Then we heard President Trump's message for America in his inaugural address.
January 20th, 2017 will be remembered as the day the people became the rulers of this nation again. The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer. This American carnage stops right here and stops right now. From this day forward, a new vision will govern our land. From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. We must protect our borders from the ravages of other countries, making our products, stealing our companies, and destroying our jobs. We will reinforce old alliances and form new ones, and unite the civilized world against radical Islamic terrorism, which we will eradicate completely from the face of the earth. Whether we are black or brown or white, we all bleed the same red blood of patriots. Together, we will make America strong again. We will make America wealthy again. We will make America proud again. We will make America safe again. And yes, together, we will make America great again. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you. God bless America.
Organizers of today's event were expecting about 800,000 people on the National Mall. So how did the speech go over with them? Here's Chris Van Cleve.
Wrapped in the flag, hearts on their sleeve, or wearing the signature Trump fashion statement, hundreds of thousands turned out to celebrate what the new president promised would be a new start.
We will make America great again.
While most of the crowd cheered, a handful of protesters shouting, "Defend democracy," moved through the masses, but they were mostly ignored. Others protested at a safe distance from the vast sea of Trump supporters. Lori Stanley was hoping the protests would stay peaceful.
I think if we start listening to each other rather than yelling at each other, maybe we'll find that we have more in common than we think.
But that's not what Maureen Gilligan concluded from President Trump's speech.
It was more divisive than it was kind of bringing people together. So I was hoping it would be more kind of looking at everybody.
Her college roommate, Rita Kovic, didn't care. She attended every inauguration but one since Jimmy Carter took office.
This sounds really hokey, but it's kind of like the Constitution is like live right in front of you.
To destroy Christianity from this
Ron
world.
Malik and his friends took the brave step of advertising their religion, despite Mr. Trump's vow to ban all Muslims. But Malik told us he took some solace that the president singled out radical Islam and not all Muslims.
Radical people are bad people. They're the terrorists. They're the actual terrorists. So we need to stop them.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
At the end of the day, Pat Balderman summed up what many told us.
I hope he can do at least half of what he said he thinks he can do. I think that would be wonderful.
Now, it'll be at least a week until we have an official estimate on the crowd size today. But, Scott, we know from past experience the area between the Capitol and the Washington Monument here on the Mall can hold 800,000 to 1 million people. Today, they did not fill that area.
Chris Van Cleve on the Mall tonight. Chris, thank you. The 70-year-old president wasted no time getting to work today. Here's Margaret Brennan.
The time for empty talk is over. Now arrives the hour of action.
And just hours later, the new president got down to business, signing an executive order to ease the burdens of the Affordable Care Act, known as Obamacare, and instructing federal agencies and departments to freeze regulations.
From this day forward, a new vision will govern our land.
Now President Trump will try to turn his vision into policy. That requires getting Congress to approve the rest of his cabinet, now that retired Generals James Mattis and John Kelly have been confirmed as Secretaries of Defense and Homeland Security. The president also plans to announce his nominee to the Supreme Court within 2 weeks. There's been a vacancy on the bench since the death of Antonin Scalia almost a year ago. And next week, Mexican officials will come to Washington to begin talks about renegotiating the North American Free Trade Agreement and building a border wall. Mr. Trump may also decide to relocate the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, a move that would send shockwaves through the Middle East.
So nice to see you. How are you?
The first family will also need to get accustomed to life in the White House. This week, the Obama family's belongings were moved out of the executive mansion, and today, in just a few short hours, the Trump families were moved in and unpacked. Scott, President Trump will begin his first day on the job with an historically low approval rating with the American public, and that could start to complicate his agenda on Capitol Hill.
Margaret Brennan for us on the parade route there in front of the White House tonight. Margaret, thank you. Now let's bring in America's favorite Washington correspondent, Bob Schieffer. Bob, what did you see today?
Well, it was the shortest inaugural speech in a long, long time. I think in some ways, though, it was the most shocking. We didn't hear Donald Trump talking about building a wall on the southern border. In some ways, though, he seemed to be talking about building a wall around the country. He talked about Buy American, Hire American. He talked about bad trade deals. He talked about traditional allies, and for too long, he said, we have tried to protect their borders while neglecting our own. This was not a Republican message. This was something much, much different. And to me, the shocking part of it was the way he tore into official Washington, Republican and Democrat. There was no outreach to either side as the leaders of Washington sat on that platform with him. I also think, Scott, if he's talking about building a wall around America, I'm not sure there's a consensus in either party right now for that. I think he's going to have some rough going ahead.
In the few seconds we have, can he make progress with the Congress now?
Well, that remains to be seen. I'm not sure. What he said sounded good to the people who put him up there, his hardcore supporters. I'm not sure how well it went over with leaders in either the Republican or Democratic Party. He can't do anything by himself. He's got to have some help up there, and I think he has to start tomorrow to try to find that, because I'm not sure this helped him today.
The insight of Bob Schieffer. Bob, thank you so much. For only the fourth time in American history, there are now 5 living former presidents: Jimmy Carter, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama. George H.W. Bush, 92 years old, was the only one who was not at the inauguration today. He is in a Houston hospital recovering from pneumonia. Today, a breathing tube was removed, and he is improving. Blocks from the White House, but far removed from the peaceful transfer of power, anti-Trump protests turned violent today. More than 200 people were arrested. 6 police officers were wounded. Here's Errol Barnett.
Vandalism aimed at downtown businesses prompted riot police to descend on these unruly protesters. One demonstrator threw a flashbang grenade back at police. It exploded in an officer's face, leaving him with minor injuries.
This is K Street. It's where many lobbyists have their headquarters in Washington, but today it appears like a conflict zone. You're seeing an example of the thousands of police officers who've been out in force. These are Metro officers in riot gear. They're trying to protect people and prevent any more businesses from being damaged.
Vivian has lived in Washington since the 1980s.
I'm just amazed at how many protests there are against the new administration, and I think rightfully so.
This Trump supporter could barely get a word in with protesters surrounding him. Hannah Zhang thinks the country is at a crossroads.
I think Trump's election is kind of really showing the two opposite sides of where America is standing right now.
More than 60 groups with varying agendas had permits to demonstrate. Most agreed on one common point of contention, the president himself. Chanel Jacobs says protesters have a right to free speech. What do you make of the thousands of other people who've protested today for many different reasons?
I say more power to them. I'm proud of them for actually stepping up and saying that they don't see that eye to eye with President Trump.
Michael Coolum drove from Connecticut to join the protest. And it's only his first day. Why not give him space and time to perhaps deliver on the things you want?
I don't think that you can ever wait to demand your rights.
Now tomorrow we'll likely see even bigger anti-Trump protests, Scott, when at least 200,000 people are expected to flood the National Mall for the Women's March on Washington.
Errol Barnett in Washington for us tonight. Errol, thank you. Mr. Trump has said repeatedly that he wants a better relationship with Russia. So we asked our foreign correspondent Elizabeth Palmer to give us the view from Moscow.
Whether President Putin was in his office behind the Kremlin walls tonight or at home, he made no comment. Earlier today, his spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Putin was unlikely to watch the inauguration live, but catch it later on the news. Donald Trump, said Peskov, is not our soulmate. That's a frosty change from the surprisingly warm endorsement Putin gave Mr. Trump during the campaign. He's a colorful and talented man, said Putin, and he says he wants to move to deeper relations. How can we not welcome that? Top of Russia's wish list is to be treated by America as an equal, not a mere regional power, as Barack Obama once called it. Andrei Soldatov is an expert on cyber espionage, and he says Russian hacking during the election campaign was meant to damage Hillary Clinton, but it had an unexpected benefit.
So Russia and the Russian role became a big story.
And is that good or bad for Russia?
It's important for many people in the Kremlin to feel that they might be treated as an important country, as something like a superpower, and that actually gives you something to be proud of.
Important enough that the new Trump administration will decide to ignore issues that have poisoned U.S.-Russia relations, like the invasion of Crimea or the hacking operation.
And if President Trump won't offer Russia what amounts to a fresh start, Scott, there are plenty of signs the Kremlin's prepared to play hardball.
Elizabeth Palmer in Red Square for us tonight. Liz, thank you. Coming up next on this expanded edition of the CBS Evening News, will Mr. Trump's business interests cause problems for his presidency? And later, Steve Hartman with kids getting a lesson in civics and civility. Presidents are exempt from the federal conflict of interest law, but President Trump enters office with an especially complex portfolio from his decades in business. Here's Anna Werner.
Donald Trump is not only now the president, he's also effectively his own landlord at the Trump International Hotel on Pennsylvania Avenue, a building his company leases from the federal government.
My theme today is 5 words: under budget and ahead of schedule. That's what we did.
It's a potential problem for President Trump, since the lease for the old post office building specifies that no elected officials in the U.S. government can hold the lease. And experts say Mr. Trump's conflicts of interest only begin there. He rejected advice from some government ethics lawyers to sell his companies or put them in a blind trust, neither of which he's required by law to do. The path he chose: to give his eldest sons, Donald Jr. and Eric Trump, full control of the multi-billion-dollar business.
They're not going to discuss it with me. Again, I don't have to do this.
He also said he would hire a new ethics advisor to review all domestic deals and said the company will not enter into any new foreign transactions. But CBS News has counted at least 10 countries, including Turkey and the United Arab Emirates, where Mr. Trump's company has business interests.
He knew exactly what he needed to do, and he was unwilling to do it.
George Washington University law professor Steve Schooner points out the president could still make profits off his companies.
Decisions that he makes as president will impact his bottom line. He will personally benefit or be hurt based on a number of decisions he makes as president.
The president has said that any profits from foreign government hotel guests would go to the U.S. Treasury. But already his status as president appears to be mixing government and business, as Mr. Trump visited his own hotel for an unscheduled dinner on Wednesday and a luncheon here yesterday. Scott.
Anna Werner in front of the Trump Hotel in Washington. Anna, thank you. When we come back, survivors are pulled from a hotel swallowed by an avalanche. In New York today, the Mexican drug lord Joaquin Guzman pleaded not guilty to federal charges that he ran the world's biggest drug trafficking organization. El Chapo, or Shorty as he is known, could face life in prison if convicted. Last night, Guzman was flown to the United States from Mexico, where he had twice escaped from prison. Federal prosecutors will attempt to seize $14 billion in drug profits. In central Italy, rescuers cheered as 10 survivors, some of them children, were pulled from a hotel buried for 2 days under 16.5 feet of snow. This was from an avalanche which had been triggered by earthquakes. Others have been located and are in the process of being rescued. At least 4 bodies have been found. More than a dozen people are still missing. Coming up next, what Steve Hartman learned from high school kids at the inauguration.